Attraction is a Russian science fiction movie that blends thrilling action sequences with thought-provoking themes about humanity's place in the universe. The film takes audiences on an epic journey that explores the consequences of first contact with an extraterrestrial civilization. A teacher was explaining the phenomenon of meteor showers that often occurred and were seen in their city. We were introduced to two beautiful girls named Yulia and her best friend, Stevlana, and a nerdy young man named Google. When Yulia got home, she asked permission from her father, who was a military member named Colonel Lebedev, to watch the most meteor showers in history that would occur this afternoon. But her father did not permit it because he was worried that something would happen to Yulia. An upset Yulia then called her boyfriend Artyom to pick her up. Meanwhile, a massive spacecraft was suddenly hit by a meteor outside the Earth. It caused the spacecraft to fall and begin to enter the Earth's atmosphere. In the control room of the Novosibirsk Space Research Institute, a series of alarms blared through the control room. They saw the meteor shower suddenly intensify, with one meteor in particular growing brighter and more prominent. The room was filled with excitement as they realized it was not a meteor but a massive object hurtling toward Earth. The military then flew two fighter planes to approach the foreign ship. Yulia, who finally left home after being picked up by Artyom, met with her best friend Stevlana on the rooftop of a building. Many people were also watching the meteor shower, which was very rare. Yulia and Artyom then went to do it after being given a room key, while Svetlana, who was alone, listened to music with her earphones and used binoculars to enjoy the meteor shower phenomenon. Meanwhile, the two fighter planes following the alien ship were ordered to fire using missiles because they misstated the spaceship for a NATO military spacecraft. As a result, the alien ship was damaged, causing it to crash into several buildings in Moscow. The people gathering to present the meteor shower also panicked and scattered to save themselves after seeing the spaceship's arrival heading towards their location. Stevlana, who was watching the meteor shower using binoculars, was too late to realize the arrival of the alien ship falling and heading towards her. As a result, she was hit by the spaceship and died. Yulia and Artyom, who were in love, were shocked by the collapse of their building, which made them almost fall from a height. The fall of the spaceship that hit the building was evident from the debris and the dust produced as a result of the fall of the spaceship. After the spaceship stopped, the military moved closer to the spaceship, placing troops in various strategic positions to deal with possible danger. Colonel Lebedev and Poleskin began to approach the alien ship. Amidst the military presence outside the ship, the tension escalated as they waited for movement from within. Suddenly, a massive hatch on the side of the spacecraft opened, revealing an astonishing sight. Stepping out of the hatch was Heen, the alien ambassador. They then faced each other, and it seemed that Heen did not want to hurt Colonel Lebedev at all. The alien seemed to understand what Poleskin said. Still, unfortunately, Poleskin, who was nervous and scared, suddenly fainted after Heen talked with Lebedev. Heen explained that his species, known as the Taurus, had traveled across the vastness of space in search of intelligent civilizations to share knowledge and forge alliances. Their mission was peaceful. Moving to the military headquarters, Colonel Lebedev explained that the alien was using Russian, asking that no humans approach his ship to avoid unnecessary casualties. Some officials who were worried about the presence of the aliens then argued to attack first. Colonel Lebedev then assured that for now, it was better to wait and see what would happen next because the most important thing for now was not to provoke war with the aliens, and it was then agreed by the president. They decided not to enter into contact with the ship and let it fix itself on its own. In the hospital, Yulia finally woke up after previously being unconscious. Yulia then found Stevlana's object beside her, which indicated that her best friend had died. Yulia then went out and found Artyom sleeping in front of his room. Yulia told Artyom she wanted to avenge the spaceship for taking her best friend's life. Moreover, the military has implemented a radio listening area at as far as 1 kilometer from the crash site of the foreign ship. All residents within the radius zone were asked to evacuate. Still, some refugees refused and chose to stay in their homes. Yulia, who was at home, took a gun from her father. She went to the headquarters with Artyom, who was gathering with his friends Karatin, Ruslan, and Piton. They planned to attack the spaceship. Artyom and his friends also made videos about anti-aliens, which they uploaded to a platform like YouTube. At night, they sneak into the crash site to investigate the alien. After they bit him up and caused him to crash down a building, they retrieved his armor before an army patrol found them. On the way, Artyom asked Yulia to hide in a car to be safer and avoid military patrols. At the same time, Artyom and his friends then entered a shop. They found a strange object that was thought to belong to the spaceship. Yulia then went to Stevlana's room, which was now falling apart. While looking at the photo of her best friend, Yulia heard strange voices approaching, which turned out to be Heen. Because of the surprise, Yulia reflexively shot him while stepping back, making her slip and fall. Fortunately, Yulia was saved by Heen. Yulia then became astonished by what she saw, the alien. Artyom and his friends, who heard the sound of gunfire and screams from Yulia, rushed upstairs. Artyom, who saw Heen, he beat him, which resulted in the alien falling and plunging to the bottom floor. They then went down and came to the place where Heen fell. Artyom found blood that was the same as human blood attached to an object or an exoskeleton. At the same time, Yulia saw Heen pretending to be dead. Yulia realized that the original body of Heen saved her earlier. When the police arrived, Artyom, Yulia, and their friends took away Heen's exoskeleton. They left the strange object that allegedly belonged to the previous spaceship because it was cumbersome. At night, Yulia could not fall asleep because she thought of the alien that saved her earlier, who turned out to have a physical form like a human. Yulia finally left in a car and intended to save Heen. Upon Yulia's return to the place where Heen was unconscious, Yulia then put him in the car and then met her friend named Hugel to ask for his help. Hugel estimated that this alien had lost much blood and needed a blood transfusion as soon as possible. They then took him to the hospital. When they were about to put a needle in his hand, it seemed like there were strange spots. And while Yulia was observing the areas, suddenly the alien grabbed Yulia's hand and moved his wristband to Yulia's hand. Yulia watched the bracelet, which seemed to have something. Through a blood test conducted by Google, it was discovered that the blood type of the alien was the same as Yulia's blood type. Yulia also transfused her blood to Heen until a few moments later, and the alien had woken up. It looked at Yulia before finally returning to unconsciousness. Next, Yulia took him to a place and then tied him up. After feeling safe enough, Yulia then went to take a shower. She was then surprised by the water that could suddenly float around the bracelet Heen gave, which manipulated water and then amazed Yulia. Meanwhile, the object that allegedly belonged to the spaceship found by the previous Artyom was now taken by the military and then brought to the headquarters for research. After talking to one of the scientists, Colonel Lebedev left the room and found something strange happening with their water. On the other hand, an angler was surprised by the river's disappearance of all the water. The military got this and found that the alien ship had pulled all the water in their area. According to their observation data, the alien ship needed water to repair the ship because it was found that the damage to the ship was reduced to 30%. There was water surrounding the ship. They then decided to send water supplies to areas experiencing drought. The scene moved to Yulia and Google, who returned to where Heen was tied up earlier. While Yulia and Google were talking, suddenly Heen woke up and spoke to Yulia, who was currently pointing a gun at her, not to be afraid. It made Yulia surprised by the Russian language spoken by the alien. He introduced himself as Heen and then told Yulia that he had to look for a device called Shulk that would allow him to travel through space without destroying his body. Yulia then told Heen to change clothes. Heen, who finished dressing, looked very happy when he found water. Yulia then drove Heen from the place. Heen finally left in a slightly strange outfit. Heen left Yulia to look for the device, which worried Yulia, and she went to catch up with Heen, but unfortunately, Yulia was too late. The patrol officer caught Heen for wearing strange clothes and walking into a restricted area. The police mistake him for a drug addict and send him off to a police station to be interrogated. Meanwhile, Artyom and his friends managed to bring Heen's exoskeleton. They then tried to cut the object but failed. Artyom then cleaned the scratch marks on the exoskeleton with a cloth that had been moistened with water. It was seen that the exoskeleton absorbed the water, and it was also noticed that the groove was slowly disappearing. One of Artyom's friends then tried to insert his hand into the exoskeleton, and surprisingly, the arm of the exoskeleton also moved following the movement of Artyom's friend's hand. But suddenly, something similar to roots appeared all over his wrist. They panicked, but finally, they escaped from the exoskeleton. Artyom intended to inform the military and report the discovery of the alien's armor that they had hidden in their garage to Colonel Lebedev. Still, unfortunately, Colonel Lebedev could not be contacted because he was on his way somewhere. After getting the location of Colonel Lebedev's destination, they went to the area shown to wait for Colonel Lebedev's arrival. They stumbled upon a crowd who were angry over rationed water. It was seen that there was a distribution of water to the surrounding residents, which several police officers guarded. But an internal resident was upset and threw a stone at the police. The policeman got hit by the rock and then shot Artyom because he thought that Artyom did it. Soon, the commotion between the residents and the police ensued. Artyom tried to break up the riot while trying to save a police officer from the residents' rage. He was mistaken for a provocateur. Artyom was beaten, arrested, and taken to the police station. At the same time, Colonel Lebedev arrived, but Artyom forgot his intention to report his discovery. Artyom was taken to the police, who were undergoing examination, and then met with Heen, who was also brought to the same place. Artyom then smiled at Heen. Here, Artyom did not yet know who Heen was. The police who examined Heen were amazed because Heen had no fingerprints, and Yulia entered the room and intended to free Heen. Yulia also found Artyom, who was being arrested. She chased Artyom, who was being taken to the next room, and promised to contact her father to release Artyom. But Artyom said something that made Yulia look upset. After Yulia managed to get Heen out of the examination room, she invited her to see her father because Yulia was sure that the object called Shilk that Heen was looking for at the military headquarters. Yulia pretended to be pregnant to meet her father in his office. She said this to distract him, and when her father was off guard, Yulia took her father's access card and gave it to Heen. After going through CCTV, Heen, who knew where the Shilk was located, disguised himself using anti-contamination clothing and Lebedev's access card so that the scientists thought he was Lebedev and let him touch the spaceship. The alien quickly opened the object, took the Shilk inside, and hurried away from the room. Scientists who were surprised by the incident then realized that it was not Colonel Lebedev, who immediately turned on the emergency alarm. Hearing the alarm, Colonel Lebedev took Yulia along with Heen, who was suddenly with them. Colonel Lebedev asked his driver to take them home while Artyom was finally free and picked up by his friends. They then returned to the base and prepared everything needed to start the attack on the foreign ship. Artyom then asked Yulia to join him, but Yulia refused. Arriving home, Yulia introduced her dog to Heen. Heen, with just one look, could tell that Yulia's dog was sick. Heen then showed Shilk to the dog, and there was a miracle because the dog recovered. While enjoying their food, it turned out that on television, the figure of Heen had been marked as a fugitive because CCTV had recorded his face. Also seen outside the window of his father's military entourage approaching the house, Yulia took Heen to Google's house. Google was looking at the anti-alien video that Artyom and his friends uploaded, influencing people to start hating aliens. Yulia then took the gun that had previously been entrusted to Google. She went with Heen to a music concert because it felt safer. At this concert, it turned out that Yulia and Heen's arrival was noticed by one of Artyom's friends, who then reported this to Artyom. Heen then invited Yulia to see his planet, which looked extraordinarily beautiful. Heen said that his world was almost the same as Earth, except that on Heen's planet, death was a scarce thing. Heen also said that his spaceship fell because a meteor hit it, and when his spaceship entered the Earth, humans shot him, which caused his spaceship to suffer more damage, and Heen also said that if a human entered the spaceship, it would blow up. Heen also added that he would not use his technology to attack humans even though he was in danger because it was part of the protocol that had to be done. He also said he would leave the Earth when the Shilk was returned to his spaceship. Yulia and Heen were about to go to Heen's ship, but in the middle of their journey, they were stopped by Artyom and his friends. Artyom beat Heen until he was almost unconscious, and Artyom's friends also took Heen's Shilk. Yulia, who kept begging Artyom to stop and defend Heen, made Artyom angry and hit Yulia. Heen, who saw Yulia being hit by Artyom, then got up and beat all of Artyom's members to the ground. One of Artyom's friends pulled out a gun and intended to shoot Heen. Still, unfortunately, the shot hit Ruslan instead. At the same time, the police came on patrol. Artyom and his friend fled while Heen was arrested and taken to the military headquarters. Artyom, who managed to escape, began to spread hoax news that one of the aliens had killed his friend and asked everyone who sided with the anti-alien to gather and avenge Ruslan's death. Despite his initial support, Peyton sometimes expressed doubt about Artyom's goals. All the anti-alien people gathered. Artyom then made a very provoking speech that made the masses pick increasingly unruly and began to move together to storm into Heen's ship. Riots ensued along the way between the military guarding the location of Heen's ship and the people who tried to break in. Meanwhile, Artyom returned to his base and wore Heen's exoskeleton. On the other hand, Yulia tried to explain to her father that the military was guilty of shooting at the alien ship and also said that Heen was not human. Heen then told Colonel Lebedev that if a human approached his ship, it would blow it up. Meanwhile, the people were getting closer to the spaceship, triggering several other robotic suits to come out and fight against the mob. They only wanted to stop the attack on those people. They did not seem to attack a single person. Meanwhile, Yulia, who failed to make her father believe in her, then took a gun, pointed it at his head, and threatened to kill herself if they were not allowed to leave. Colonel Lebedev could do nothing but let them go in a military car. After Yulia left with Heen, Colonel Lebedev prepared a tactical team to catch up with Yulia. The tactical team has been at the riot scene, trying to take down the people attacking the ship. Meanwhile, Yulia and Heen were suddenly intercepted by Artyom, who was currently using Heen's exoskeleton and attempted to stop the car that Yulia was driving. As a result, the car incident occurred and made Yulia unconscious. Heen then got out of the car and fought with Artyom. A very unbalanced fight made Heen thoroughly beaten by Artyom. Yulia, who eventually came to her senses, sped up her car and crashed into Artyom, who almost succeeded in killing Heen. Yulia then got out of the car and headed to Heen's place. Meanwhile, the military, led by Lebedev, had taken down the people who attacked Taurus. Colonel Lebedev then put down his weapon as a sign that he did not want to shoot. Artyom, who was being crushed by the car, then forced himself to escape the car crash, resulting in the exoskeleton arm he was wearing being cut off. Anton then automatically exits the exoskeleton. Seeing that Heen was still alive, Artyom then took a gun and pressed it repeatedly against Heen. Heen, who saw Artyom about to shoot, tried to protect Yulia from being attacked, but unfortunately it was too late. Yulia was unconscious after several bullets were lodged in her body. Colonel Lebedev, who saw this, immediately ran to Yulia with Heen looking unconscious. Colonel Lebedev then hugged Yulia and cried for his daughter because it seemed like Yulia was lifeless. The aliens, Taurus, then approached Colonel Lebedev. They then took Heen and Yulia and allowed Colonel Lebedev to enter their ship. Inside the ship, Heen and Yulia were then placed in a resting place. They left Colonel Lebedev standing and watching Yulia's body being covered like a stream of water. The spaceship's computer explained to Colonel Lebedev that they were performing regeneration on Yulia's body and guaranteed that Yulia would still live at least 70 to 80 years on Earth. Colonel Lebedev, who looked relieved, then asked about Heen's condition. It explained that under Heen, he would live forever, but Heen gave his life to Yulia. It could not accurately ascertain why Heen wanted to do so because it happened randomly, with the possibility of humans calling it fate. Colonel Lebedev then asked about the whereabouts of the others and why only Heen was seen. From the computer's explanation, it was found that Heen went alone because they should not visit planet Earth because of its aggressive social life and climatic conditions, as well as 4 million deaths due to violence over the past 5,000 years. In the same period, 15,000 military conflicts occurred due to the struggle for resources and the extension of humanity for more than 600 years. Their race was conducting an observation mission to another developing planetary race. From that mission, Heen gathered information to prove whether humans on Earth were ready to meet their race. The results of this mission were expected to be negative, but there were still other factors that could change the initial estimates, depending on Heen's decisions that could not yet be analyzed, including the relationship between Heen and Yulia. The results of this mission would still be reviewed. The future depended on the Heen because there were things that they did not understand about the Heen. Colonel Lebedev answered that there were more important things than immortality. Yulia, her father, and everyone else returned to their daily lives as the spaceship departed and released excess water. Meanwhile, Artyom was arrested and presumably sent to a prison camp. Finally, Yulia with her dog and the bracelet given by Heen earlier was sparkling. So, what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below, and if you liked the video, please like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you in the next video.